Hi, I'm Dr. Stan Steindl. Welcome to Compassion in a T-shirt. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Diana Hill. Diana is a clinical psychologist and expert in acceptance-based and science-backed approaches to living well. She's the author of the Self-Compassion Daily Journal, a transformative guide to help you cultivate kindness and forgiveness towards yourself through powerful writing prompts grounded in acceptance and commitment therapy, mindfulness, and compassion focus therapy. Many of us struggle with self-criticism. This journal offers practical tools to let go of self-criticism and embrace ourselves with compassion. Diana's work helps individuals reduce anxiety and depression, improve relationships, bolster self-worth and confidence, reduce stress, and build resilience and optimism. Today, we'll delve into the insights and practical applications from her journal, explore the benefits of self-compassion, and hear about her own personal journey. Plus, we realise through our conversation that it's time to bring back love. So listen out for that in the latter half of this episode. And so I bring you Dr. Diana Hill. Well, Dr. Diana Hill, welcome to Compassion in a T-shirt.
Good. It's good to be here. I was just saying that I feel at home, even though you're all the way in Australia and I'm in Santa Barbara, because I see the surfers behind you and the inhale, exhale, and I'm like, this is my stuff. So
This is
it's
it.
good to meet you.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a bit cold here for surfing at the moment, but I probably should this weekend go for another surf. Self-criticism is something that many people, kind of struggle with. So I thought we might start there if that's okay. What is self-criticism? What does it really sound or kind of feel like? And what are the sorts of things that people might criticize themselves about?
I think that's a great question for the listeners to ask themselves as I answer it.
Hmm.
Uh, when you're going about your day, and we all have this chattery voice that is constantly going, a lot of times it's just producing kind of commentary about things, some of it random, some of it helpful. And then it also has a tone to it, a little corrective, a little kind of harshness to it. And it shows up at certain times for some of us. Oftentimes it's when we need it the least, like it shows up when we're learning something new. Maybe we're cooking a new dinner or we're on a new podcast or kind of being on the edge of our comfort zone. Our critic gets in there and may say some things to you. So you could kind of notice, like, when does it get louder? When does it get softer? It has usually a judgmental quality. And then the other nature of self-criticism is that it's always under this guise that I'm here to help, right? I'm
Yeah.
I'm here to get you in line. I'm here to make you do a better job. And what we know from the research, I know you've had some phenomenal researchers on this show, is that it actually doesn't pan out that way. That people that are more critical towards themselves can end up maybe not being as innovative or creative or as bold or even as successful. And they tend to, when they make a mistake, stay in the mistake a little bit longer. So we have this, false belief that self-criticism is helpful. All of us have. I haven't met anyone that doesn't have some degree of an inner critic. Some of ours
Mm.
are louder. Some of them push us around a little bit more. And really, I see self-compassion and psychological flexibility is about what to do when that critic shows up. How much do you listen to it? How much do you engage with it? And if you're not engaging with it, what else are you doing?
Yes, there's a sort of a great paradox of self-criticism in a way, isn't there? We do feel like it is going to help us. We feel like it's going to motivate us or keep us on track or kind of even help us learn or something, but then it ends up having the very opposite effect. We feel kind of less motivated. We feel small. We sort of and I think it was interesting how you said it that sometimes self-criticism actually shows up when we least need it, too, when we are embarking on something new or trying to learn something, and then there's this kind of this critical voice.
And it starts really young, right? So just this morning, we're taking care of my summertime here. We're taking care of my
Mm.
neighbor's cat. My son is taking care of the neighbor's cat. But I was on a run. I was coming back from a run, and I get a call that he can't find the cat. Right. We've all had this experience of taking care of somebody's pet. I remember I lost my friend's snake in our house when one
Oh,
summer, right?
wow.
And like the dread, oh no, I can't find the cat. And I find my son in the bunk bed, in bed, covers up and completely, crying. I can't do this. I'm not going to camp. I'm a horrible person. I lost the cat, right?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
when he's in that, I mean, obviously he's upset, which is understandable. He cares. But when we're in that place where we're being so self-critical and so down on ourselves and paralyzed by maybe a mistake we made or just sort of things going wrong that maybe sometimes even aren't our fault,
Mm.
it prevents us from the kind of engagement that would be helpful. Like it would be really helpful if he could hold my hand, we could go look for the cat together and we could, maybe even he could go to camp and come back and see if the cat comes back later this afternoon. But we all, these are small things, but we have this happen all of the time where
Mm.
we get into a difficult spot and we beat ourselves up about it. And it leads us to places that actually are less effective in our
Mm.
lives. Maybe it's that book that you don't write because you're so critical every single time you start putting some words on the page, or that guitar that you haven't picked up for 10 years because when you start to play it, you sound so bad. So you won't do it. And that's where self compassion, I think, really comes in because it helps us get over some of those hurdles that are in the way of us really kind of being how we want to be and doing what we want to do.
The self-criticism really ramps up when something's very important to us, doesn't it, in a way? Like if something's really important to us, it means a lot. We feel very invested in it. And there's a disappointment there, or there's a challenge, or something doesn't quite go right, then in comes the self-criticism. And I suppose I'm sort of sensing too, that's where we might kind of start to feel some shame about the situation, ourselves, we're no good, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what sometimes the self critic is trying to protect us from, like I don't want anyone to see
Mm.
this, or I feel shame about myself, who I am. That's where a lot of Paul Gilbert's research comes from. And he really links this sort of self criticism, threat system, shame um,
Mm.
together. And, shame is a human emotion that we all have, and like all of our emotions, important to have in some way, so shame is a pro-social, not pro-social, but it's emotion that like kind of keeps us, stuck sometimes, but also kind of evolved for a reason, right? So that we will do things that aren't harmful to others. And at the same time, when we're stuck in shame and we're criticizing ourselves, it's really immobilizing.
Mm.
I have tons of
Yes.
shame pockets, you know,
Ah,
and work with
right.
clients all the time in their shame pockets.
Yes. Yeah. No, it can be very paralyzing, immobilizing. We hide away. We sort of isolate ourselves when we're feeling shame. Although it does have that evolved function, or sort of trying to, in a funny sort of a way, kind of prevent us from being cast out of the group, I suppose, isn't it? And
Mhm.
trying to um, you've written the Self Compassion Daily Journal, which is a kind of a wonderful companion book, trying to sort of manage self criticism and approach it differently, finding different ways to relate to ourselves. You've mentioned self compassion and psychological flexibility, I think. So yeah, how does your journal really help us to relate differently to ourselves and to manage self criticism?
Well, I think it's helpful to tell the story of how the journal came about
Okay, great.
to um to describe that. And I'll say it's a guided journal, so it has really stepwise actions that you can take. It talks about all sorts of topics related to self-compassion, everything from how do you get present with yourself, how do you open up to feelings, how do you value yourself, how do you have compassion for your body, all these things. And it's a real combination of, I would say, ACT. with compassion focused approaches and my own twist to it. But it came about because I was actually working on an idea for another book, which is the book that I'm working on now. And I was at
Mm.
ACBS, the World Conference, where a lot of folks come together that are interested in contextual sciences. And I was wanting to pitch this idea for the book that I was wanting to write to New Harbinger. And Matthew McKay, who's the um, publisher for New Harbinger, was in a conference room in a workshop. And I went into the workshop and I sat down next to him thinking that I was going to be all schmoozy to pitch this idea. And the workshop was on the self-critic. And the workshop was an experiential one. So in ACT, we do things called real plays, not role plays, which is like you bring your real stuff and you play it out with another therapist and they work with you on it. And the instructions were, and listeners can think about this, like if someone gave you this instruction, the instructions were think about a moment in your life that you have a lot of shame around, that maybe happened a long time ago. It shaped the way that you view yourself. It maybe even some of your inner critic voice kind of came out of that moment and it's still with you now and it still pushes you around. And then the workshop next thing was turn to the person next to you and tell them about that moment. So here I am sitting next to Matthew McKay, this publisher that I was trying to push. And and their job is to practice compassion, to be
Right.
a compassionate human to hear your shameful story. So I told it to him, and I can disclose what it is a bit if you want that disclosure because it's kind of interesting. But I told it to him, and after I told it to him, he was the most like just I remember his eyes and the way he looked at me. He was the most compassionate human. I don't remember what he said, but it was so good, so healing. And then he did the same for me. And then at the end of the workshop, he said to me, I think you'd be a great person to write a book on self-compassion. And then became then it became this journey of what does that mean? What does that mean? Not in a, just research protocol way, but like what happened in that room? What shifted in me? How did this healing experience of, what does it actually mean to practice full compassion for ourselves? And I spent the next, year or so working on that.
Mm.
And then eventually got the other book that I wanted to write, but maybe I needed to write this one first,
Yeah.
because I see self-compassion as the foundation of so many things in our life.
Mm. Yes, just on the sort of the shame memory piece, it is easy, as you were saying that, it's easy to think of those times, isn't it? We all have those memories of very difficult times, self-conscious emotions, feeling that sort of social threat, and yet self-compassion can be a kind of a pathway to um, at least softening some of that, or kind of moving along towards resolving those sorts of feelings. You decided to make it a very, as you say, practical book, a sort of with prompts and so on. How does the book then work the reader through, kind of managing self-criticism?
Well, I start with maybe even how Matthew McKay would have started with me or how I start with myself now, which is um, some of the fears that we have. And many of us, I know you've interviewed Marcela Matos or spoken with Marcela Matos, but she's got some beautiful research on fears of compassion and how when we have more higher, greater fears of either receiving compassion or giving compassion or offering compassion to ourselves, it actually impacts our well-being. I mean, she did this big study with 21 countries, like over 4,000 people during COVID, and those that had greater fears of compassion had more negative impact on their well-being, depression, anxiety during COVID. So we start with exploring some of those fears. Like, what are you afraid of in being kinder to yourself? Like in that memory that you have that you hold so much shame around, if you were actually to like see it in another way, offer yourself some kindness, some understanding, look at the context. There's probably a reason why that happened that is more than just about you as an individual in that moment. There was a whole context that was leading up to that. But what are you afraid of if you were to do that? And for me, a lot of my fears around being compassionate to myself were things like I'm afraid that I'll lose my edge. Like I'm kind of afraid that my critic is what's led me to be successful.
Mm.
And if I let go of my critic, then I'm just gonna like not care anymore and be lazy and not do anything, right? Some of us have fears that if we're self-compassionate, then we may like become too dependent on others, or that we'll be in this like pity party for ourselves. And this is really this distinction that self-compassion is not pity, self-compassion is not self-esteem. Self-compassion, maybe we should define it, is
Mm.
different than
Please.
that, right? It's about making contact with that moment, this moment where there's suffering, where there's something uncomfortable, where there's something painful, acknowledging it, being present with it, and then doing something to support yourself, being kind, remembering that you're not alone in it. So we start with that, and then we walk through these three, sort of aspects of self-compassion, which have to do with being mindful, being kind, but also the perspective of common humanity. And that's what really happened in that room with, when you hear somebody else's shame story and you share yours and you're like, that's the thing that you've been carrying around for 30 years. Oh my gosh, you need to let that go. That is not a big deal. But they're thinking the same thing about you,
Mm.
right? And as therapists, I mean, as a clinician, I hear people's shame stories all day long. This is what I do for a living, and I just love them even more. I mean, like the more cracks in the pot, the more beautiful you are to me, right? So that's another aspect of common humanity, is we see ourselves as just the human experience. This is my human experience to have this, you know. And then I walk people, we have a day for a chapter, and then there's 7 days to each and every chapter. And um, because it's aligned with ACT, we do things like diffusing your inner critic thoughts. We have a whole chapter on that. We have a whole chapter on basically acceptance, which is how to be open with, to difficult feelings, how to open to them. I have a whole chapter where people walk through what it means to live a well-lived life. Like, what does it mean to live out your values, and how could self-compassion help you with that? Um, and then I had to do a chapter on the body, because that's something that's in my own history and in my own research and background was in eating disorders, and really how to have compassion and listen to our bodies, because in so many ways we have disconnected to them from them, or we um, don't listen to the wisdom of our bodies. So I have a chapter on that. And then finally, how to work with regrets and forgiveness and self-forgiveness and the flow of compassion, which is starting to see that this self-compassion can bring you energy that will be able to spread to compassion to others, which is also what I'm kind of really about, is the
Mm.
flow.
Mm. Yes, those fears at the start are important, aren't they? Because if people can start to reflect on that and identify some of those fears and perhaps even the origins of those fears, then understanding them and then sort of somewhat overcoming those fears a little bit as well, making sense of why, of course, we have certain reservations or reluctances about compassion across the three flows, but definitely self-compassion, and bringing compassion to those fears is almost what we're doing in the end. For me, it was definitely feelings of undeservedness. That was what was striking when I first encountered self-compassion some years ago. It was just feeling like, no, I'm a therapist. I'm meant to be compassionate towards others. I don't deserve, my own compassion. And there's a whole range, isn't there, of different ways that people can kind of feel blocked with self-compassion, and kind of working through all of that. I notice your definition sort of also draws a little bit on mindful self-compassion, I guess, as well. The idea of mindful awareness, common humanity, self-kindness, the sort of the three components there of the definition from mindful self-compassion. You've sort of integrated really quite a few approaches. You have ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, and there's mindfulness based ideas and practices there, and CFT, which of course is one that I'm particularly interested in, and perhaps even the mindful self-compassion. I mean, how did you find that, kind of sort of integrating those various approaches?
Um, it's sort of like my dad's cast iron skillet that he gave me when I got married.
Oh.
It's been seasoned. It's been used a lot. So there's a lot of there's layers and layers and layers of experiences that I've had that I've been influenced by. And I want to give a nod to, there's Kristen Nepp's work in there, there's Paul Gilbert, there's Joe Sorochi and Steve Hayes and all the people in ACT and concept, and there's a consilience, right? So consilience being uh, all these folks are sort of saying things that contribute to one sort of greater common wisdom. And if you zoom out even more and you start looking at indigenous wisdom, right, or Buddhist wisdom, there's a lot of the same stuff, right? But we just like to put letters on things and
Mm,
definitions on things to research them, obviously, operationalize them. But my experience as a clinician is sort of an integrative one, one of consilience. And then there's just my own personal experience in being in the room with people where I'm not like separating out, this is mindfulness, this is kindness. Oh no, now we're in common humanity, where you're just in the experience, the energy of compassion. And I really see, physicists define energy as the capacity to do work. And there's heat energy, right? There's kinetic energy, there's potential energy. And I see compassion as an energetic force that, unlike other maybe values or maybe not values, other ways of being, that it's renewable. And when we start to access self-compassion or compassion for others, we are uplifted and we become positive energizers. So that's another way of looking at it.
mm,
There's many avenues to one,
mm,
I think, greater message of kindness, and maybe it all boils down to like love and care for humans,
mm,
including yourself.
hmm. Yes, really, the different approaches are somewhat just human made anyway, aren't they? We come up with these different delineations or whatever, but really it's not. I'm just suddenly thinking it's almost not even integration being the right word, but rather kind of expansion or something. It's more about sort of just acknowledging that all of this is coming at this basic kind of concept of what it is to be human, and we can sort of explore all of these different ideas to be helpful. I
Hmm.
remember my grandfather saying that when you light a candle, sort of thing, you can light someone else's candle and it doesn't take away from your own flame at all. You're able to spread light, into the world, sort of thing. And that's kind of what you're saying, I think, is that compassion is like that. It sort of spreads and doesn't have to detract. We can still maintain that self-compassionate approach, receive compassion from others, and offer it to them also in return. It kind of spreads.
Hmm. Yeah, I just interviewed Emma Sapala, who is
Mm,
he teaches leadership at Yale School of Management and director of the Center for Altruism at Stanford. And some of her research is on leaders that, when she looked at organizations and leaders that where there was sort of pockets of places of the highest productivity, what was happening in those pockets. And within those pockets, there was usually one person whom they defined as a positive energizer. And these people, when you are around them, you feel uplifted by them. They sort of have this glow about them. You're like, like the heliotropic effect of plants where you like lean towards the sun, like you want to be around them, right? And then the characteristics of these positive energizers are self-awareness. They have their own sort of inner awareness of how to care for themselves, take care of themselves, aware of what's happening. They often have contemplative practices but then they also are present, engaged, and actually really care about you as an individual. And you feel like you're the person that they're there to see. You feel seen, you feel heard, you feel appreciated. So what is that? That's compassion, right?
Mm,
And that it is this energetic force, whether it's in our leadership that makes us actually our performance is better, we're more innovative, all these things. We don't want to quit our jobs, or it's in our households. I know that when I'm practicing more self-compassion as a parent, like when my kid doesn't want to get out of his bed and go to camp, and I'm like, this is a hard moment as a parent because you need to go to camp because I have an interview today, right?
yes.
Um, in those moments, the more I draw on the energy of self-compassion, the better parent I'm going to be, and then I'm modeling how to do it for him. And sometimes the most compassionate thing to do is to say, I need to get out of bed and go. And so it's not actually encouraging you to not be active in your life. It actually is quite energizing.
Mm. Yes, that's actually one of the big blocks, isn't it? Especially, for example, compassionate leadership or compassion in the workplace and so on is the sort of the worry that compassion is sort of the people taking the easy route or getting let off the hook or something like that. But actually, compassion is often doing the thing that's a bit harder, in fact, because we're trying to do the thing that's kind of good for us rather than necessarily just feels good. And I think Kristen Neff would say, self-compassion is about health and well-being, taking the steps that's really good for our health and well-being. And I'm very keen to read Emma's book Sovereign, I think, isn't it? Is
Yeah, that's what I was
the
just interviewing her about. Yeah.
yeah, the new book, and
Hmm.
so that idea of sovereignty, I suppose, is I'll be interested to see, but yes, perhaps adjacent or aligned or a part of compassion, I guess,
Oh
in a
yeah. I
sense.
mean, she's definitely talking about compassion. I mean, she's using the word sovereign for a lot of the things that we're already talking about, right? To this empowerment that comes from um awareness and presence and love and embodiment. Um, and and how it's just a different way of, I mean, everyone's creating new words for different things, but
Yeah,
that's her new book.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was interviewing a fellow called Bruno Signaco, um, who really, yeah, is trying to just reintroduce the idea of love into, the way we speak about things in business and so on, a sort of a humanistic love, I guess, being able to reclaim that term in the sense so that it to have a kind of that deeper notion of what it is to love and care and have concern and for our fellow humans, I suppose, and even in the workplace is sort of it all kind of all roads lead to Rome. He actually is Italian, but all roads lead to Rome in
Well, an
terms of
Italian
love.
talking about love. Now we're talking.
Yeah.
That's good. But yeah, I think if we think about the one of the emotions that's the most energizing, it is love.
Mm,
Like love can get us to do all sorts of things that we think are not possible.
mm,
And whether that's love for our planet, love
yeah.
for an ecosystem that you just, it's like, oh, I want to take care of this, or it's love for your partner, or love for yourself, or love for your a friend. Oh my gosh, the things that you could do for a friend if you love them. So
Mm,
actually in the book that I'm writing now, the end of my introduction is
mm,
about love, and it's about how we all are love. We all are love, and that's something that I tell my children on a regular basis, is that I just say, you are love, you are made of love, you are love, and I love you. And we could say that to ourselves, right? It could be very
mm.
helpful.
And how powerful too, because that becomes the emotional memory for them later. Quite apart from any kind of shame memory that we sometimes struggle with, love memory is sort
Hmm.
of that's a gift, isn't it, for sort of children to experience that and to
Right.
to grow
And
up
if
with that.
here's the ticket to freedom is, if you can start loving yourself in that shame memory.
Mm,
And that's actually what turned it around for me in that workshop and in writing this book, because a lot of my shame memory was the shame memory that I shared with Matthew was about a memory when I was 17 years old, and I had bulimia, and I used to drive and pick up all this food on the way home from high school, eat all this food because I had anorexia. So it's like the rebound effect from anorexia, right? If you starve yourself, you're going to binge. So I'd like eat all this food on the way home from school, and then I'd stop at a park, and I'd go and purge in the bathroom at this public park. And one day, this young mom and this kid came into the bathroom, and this little 3-year old poked her head under the stall, and the mom pulled her back and said, "That's disgusting." And I carried that belief about that's disgusting for so like that I'm disgust, you can see that how the narrative
Mm.
grows, right? I'm
Yeah.
disgusting. It became like even when I was recovered from my eating disorder, it's still like, but I'm disgusting. That's why I don't want to be part of the group, or I'm just gross, or all those beliefs that we build up about ourselves. And going through this practice of self-compassion, like in a very deep personal way, as I was writing this book, and even just the spark of that day with Matthew led me to another place where I can now look back at my 17-year-old self and love her and see, oh, I get it. Like I get why you were so stuck. You needed help. You were, the way that anyone, if she were my client coming into my office, I could look at them that way, but I
Mm.
had a hard time seeing myself in that way. So the power of self-compassion is that it kind of it breaks up these things that we have within ourselves, these dark spots, these shame spots, or even just the little everyday, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that spots. And we see ourselves differently through the eyes of love and through the eyes of, hey, I want to help you out. You know,
Mm.
I don't want you to have to make that mistake again. That hurt. Or you need help, or you're not alone in it.
Mm.
So it's a powerful, and it's also, I would say, self-compassion now is becoming so common in our languaging, like anything like mindfulness. It might lose some of its juice if we overuse the word, but it's a
Mm.
powerful practice.
Mm. Yes, no, I need to think more about love, I suppose.
Maybe this
Um,
podcast is about love, not about self-compassion. We can
exactly.
change the topic.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking, because I know that in the sort of the research world, and people who are thinking about compassion in sort of a serious way and sort of trying to define it and all that sort of thing, sometimes there is a kind of a, I don't know, an aversion to the word love, or there's a kind of this determined thing about, kind of differentiating compassion from love. And I think in some ways, um, there is the notion that we still need to be compassionate towards those that we don't love, or maybe even
Right.
those that we hate, I suppose, and to ourselves too. Often we're bringing compassion to those parts of ourselves that we hate or loathe, or, those shame pieces. But what you're saying is that we're not sort of giving them love or something like that. We're really, it's a deeper, more solid, profound sense of love and care for human beings and living beings and the planet. It's something deeper than just uh, sort of um, more frivolous ideas of what love might be, and sort of bringing love back into compassion is perhaps one of the things.
This is the new t-shirt that you can make. Let's bring
Yes,
love back into
bring
compassion.
love.
Don't kick love out. It can be included. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
I I'm a long-term follower of Thich Nhat Hanh, and he's just such a guiding light in all of this. And he used to talk a lot about how we heal the past and we heal the present with our actions in the future. I mean, we heal the past and we heal the future with our actions in the present. And he would have us do, I remember when I went to retreat
Mm.
with him, I
Ah.
was like 19, 20 years old. And he had us bring, and I was kind of struggling with my dad at the time. Um, ironically, my dad is the reason why I got interested in Thich Nhat Hanh, but struggled with my dad as a 19, 20-year-old. And he had us bring our parent into the present moment with like imagine them right now as part of us and imagine them as every single cell. They're in, if they're a biological parent, they're in every cell of our body. But even if they're not a biological parent, they are in every cell of your body because they've impacted you cellularly, epigenetically, right? So you bring this, whatever that person is or experience, into your being, and that you do not have to have a relationship with that person to love that within yourself. And in doing that, you transform it, that you can transform even the most difficult things. Not that you have to love that person, but you can offer love to the painful aspects of whatever that relationship is. So I do see
Mm.
love as a healing power. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, like, keep the roommate that's driving you nuts or stay married to the person that's cheating on you. But love may be actually the thing that allows you to release that, but not doing it from a vindictive space, from a healing
Mm.
space. Yeah.
Mm. Oh, that's a very special experience. I sort of almost can't imagine, but sort of can sort of imagine just how sort of moving and poignant that would be to go on retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh. I was sort of really very would be curious to hear more about that. I was just checking, and yes, I've got a few of his books, and one is called How to Love, I think, and
Yeah.
so it's sort of that's there it is, I
There it is. Yeah.
suppose.
Well, we go, after the pandemic. So I went when I was 20. My parents
Mm.
would go every year.
Ah,
When I was like a
wow.
teenager, they were very involved in Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings. And I finally was like, because I was like, I roll. I was so like, my dad's Buddhist. I'm going to go into yoga. That's how I'm going to rebel. Right.
Okay.
So I was like anti. And then I finally went with, he's now my husband. He was my boyfriend at the time. And then, after the pandemic, we were just like, we gotta go back. And so we've been going every year for the past 3 years to Plum Village in France, bringing our kids. And 2 years ago was well, Ty, he had a stroke in
Yeah.
2014, but then he died in 2021, and we were
Mm.
there that summer, and we just happened to be there for the spreading of his ashes. So they brought his ashes. They brought some of his ashes to Vietnam, which is his homeland, and they brought some of his ashes to his monastery in Plum Village, France. Um, and we got to line up, and my kids were at the front of the line because Ty always put the children at the front. And we did this mindful walk through the lotus pond and the plum trees and the aspen trees. And the monastics scooped a little bit of his ashes into our hands. So here's my 9-year-old getting these ashes in his hands. And they scooped it into his hands, and then we were in mindful walking to go spread a little on the lotus flowers, or go spread some on an aspen tree, or maybe on a plum tree. We'll be back next year. You can have a little, continuation of Thai. And I was at the very end of the line, so it's like 700 people on retreat together, and I couldn't find my son anywhere. I had a 9, and I think he was 12-year-old at the time. And finally I found him, and he was just sobbing, and he was being held by this nun. So this is like love, right? And I went up to them, and I was like, "Are you okay?" And I thought it was like, okay, this is like a gnarly experience for a 9-year-old. Like, he knows this guy, Thich Nhat Hanh. I have like a picture of him inside my cupboard in the kitchen, and now I'm holding his body, his dead body. Like, this is like,
Right.
intense. But so I was like, okay, this is just overwhelming. But what was so interesting, going back to your worthiness comment, was went up to him and I said, "Are you okay? What's going on here? And can I help you?" And he said to me, "I just feel like I don't deserve this.
Mm.
I don't deserve to be part of this." Like, this is,
Right.
he knew it was so big to
Mm.
spread this man's ashes. And and what the I turned to the nun and I was like, "Well, what help me out here. I don't really know what to do. I haven't encountered this parenting experience before. Help me out." And the sister Deer Park, who's very skilled with the children, and she said, "It's not about whether or not you deserve this. You have been given a gift, by having this experience. And now, what are you going to do with it?
Mm.
This is your gift. You've been given it. Ty gave it to you. You were here at this moment in this time to receive this. And that was an act of love too, right? Because there could have been, in some ways when someone's struggling with something or says, I don't deserve something, you want to be like, oh, but you do deserve this. You're such a good little boy. You're so special. You're so great, you know? But really an act of love is to say, you are empowered.
Mm.
And I believe that you have always had, but you have the power now to spread what you've been given. And that's the sort of positive energizer, a positive leader that empowers people.
Mm.
So, Ty's been, I mean, he's just very much part of, we're about to leave in like 2 weeks. So I'm, on the edge of Plum Village right now. But I do think that these teachings of compassion are very deep. It's important to not get so entangled in the operate, sort of like it's this, and this, 3 bullet points to that, and 10 bullet points to that, even though I do some of that in my writing, to remember that it's an embodied experience of compassion and that we've all had it, we've all experienced it, and we all have the capacity to offer it to others. And that is actually what the planet is calling for right now, even from our 9-year-olds, to be
Mm.
empowered to be compassionate.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. That was a very, very moving story. He's a wise little fellow, isn't he? Your son, it seems. We,
It was little.
we learn a lot from our kids, I
Oh,
suppose,
I thought you were
too.
talking
And
about Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a wise little fellow too.
oh, yes, no, I was,
My
well,
son
that's
is as
true.
well.
Yeah, no, I was thinking of your son, but mainly because he's got a big heart, hasn't he? I mean, I'm not sure if that's the same one that was looking after the cat as well, but
It's the same one.
yeah, yeah. So he's sort of a lovely little fellow and very, kind of emotionally aware, but wise, like he's grappling with sort of some of the big ticket items of life and how to sort of really navigate all of that. And he sort of shows us the way, really, in a sense. That's what we might think we're big and grown up or whatever, but we're still really grappling with and navigating that same stuff.
And what happened to most of us when we were those wise little fellows? Because I think we all are wise little fellows.
Mm,
Um,
yeah,
and somewhere along the way, that gets, like, don't feel so much. You're so sensitive. You have too much empathy. I mean, especially around the socialization of our boys,
yeah.
especially, like I got 2 boys in baseball. And it's like, what is it? The one rule in baseball, don't cry in baseball,
Oh,
So I just see
okay.
it. I see it, you start seeing it like age 5, 6, 7, 8 of that wisdom, that natural capacity that we know from research is in children to be
Mm,
compassionate gets knocked right out of us.
mm,
Because we need to like be strong and we need to, I don't know what it is. Don't show your weaknesses. And then those little
mm,
fears of compassion trickle in and bind up all our energy. So
yeah.
that's part of the reason why we go to Plum Village in the summers is we just want to open these kids up and keep them in touch with something that is already there. It's their true nature to be compassionate. It's all of our true natures to be compassionate. And it's in every single one of us. It's built into our nervous system.
Mm,
But then we have all these blocks and resistances and stuff like that.
yeah. Yes, no, that's very interesting stuff. I wonder if he'll rebel with yoga as well, rather than
I
Buddhist.
don't know. He's going to rebel somehow. Yeah. We'll
Let's hope
find
so.
out.
Let's hope so.
Hmm.
It's sort of part of the deal. You
Hmm.
do talk about yeah, the way that self-compassion can really sort of improve and deepen relationships. You've alluded to that there. I wonder, yeah, could you sort of elaborate a little bit more there on sort of on self-compassion and I guess the flows of compassion, isn't it, really, in relationships and how that can improve things?
Well, we see this in my clinical practice all the time. I'll share a story that's not a personal one because I'm sharing a lot of how much self-disclosure can you handle? Um, um, but so, you know, changing, identifying information and details. I think about, a client of mine who um, was in the healthcare. We'll make them a physician, right? And going through cancer, and how their own like inability to make contact with their fear and the existential panic that shows up when you have something like a cancer diagnosis led them into like taskmasting and getting all this stuff done and doing all the appointments and then not showing any of that to their partner, right? And then here they have a partner that all they want to do is be there for them, and the relationship spreads apart.
Mm.
And then 6 months later, they're coming into my office and they're saying things like, "We just feel so disconnected," and the person that has cancer is like, "Well, they didn't show up for me during my cancer," and the person that it's like that we see how that when we can't be with our own selves and open to our own feelings and acknowledge that we are having a hard time, it really impacts our connection to others and the capacity to let other people in to help or to share what we're feeling with others so that we can grow that energy of compassion and we can get through hard things like cancer. So that's where I see self-compassion in one way helps our relationships, because we're just more um, emotionally sophisticated, right? We can know what we're feeling, share what we're feeling, also care for some of our own feelings so that we're not dumping them all on another person too, which is also part of being self-compassionate. I'll coach my teenage clients or my college age clients. I work with like later teens, but I'll coach them because oftentimes they'll call and they'll dump on their parents, right? And I'll tell them like, okay, you call and dump on your parents. That's good. Your parents are happy to get the dump. Like they're just happy that you're calling them. But here's the ticket. At the end of your dump, when you tell them about everything that's going on in your life, all the things that you are, it's so horrible. At the end, I want you to tell them one way that you are going to care for yourself amidst all of that. If you just wrap it up with that little thing, like, and mom, you know what I'm going to do today about that? I'm going to go and I'm just going to take a shower and go to class. Your parent, that is the biggest gift you could give your parent on the planet. And they will have much more capacity to listen to all of the dump, right? Another practice of self-compassion. You're showing up in a way where you're saying, I'm allowed to have all this struggle. I'm allowed to complain about all my struggle. And I also have a responsibility to care for myself in this struggle. Not that it's all up to you, but you can do a part of it too.
Mm. Oh, that really helps, those examples, actually. I really appreciate that. There's a sort of a there's two ends of it, isn't there? One end is the person who struggling with anxiety or worry or sort of rumination or self-criticism, kind of internalizes everything and disconnects and moves away from, versus the person who is feeling so vulnerable and kind of dependent in a way, and so clings on to the other person. Both of those ends of the spectrum can create challenges, I guess, for the relationship, and finding that middle way where we can be self-compassionate, create a sort of a sort of a groundedness, I guess, maybe even a kind of calmness, groundedness, a kind of a strength within us, so that we can both feel confident and able to reach out and ask for help, as well as come up with our own ideas about what might be most helpful. And that's the kind of the balance there. And when we can do that, then that kind of just helps the relationship. It means we're much more able to stay connected and close and safe with perhaps our partners or other members of our family or even our friends and so on.
Yeah, or our therapists, right? If you could imagine if you had a therapist that wasn't taking care of themselves or self-compassionate, and then, you were like, why is it that you can go in and share all this stuff? Because you feel like, okay, there's a solidity there. This person that's across the way from me on the couch can handle this. And
Mm.
it's not that they're closed from their emotions, because you don't want that therapist either. You know, you want a human with a beating heart that feels and that tears up with you when you tear up, and maybe even you feel a sense of, oh, they kind of love me, because I do love my
Mm.
clients. Dare I say it?
Yeah.
Like love. And not in that kind of way, but in just like, I care about you. I want to know when you have that baby, I'm thinking about you. Or when what happened with your mom when you guys were meeting after a long time together, time apart. So the capacity to have self-compassion actually makes you more capable of receiving other people's challenges, and therefore makes
Yes.
you more accessible, and more present. Because
Mm.
like in session, I'll put my hand on my own chest, like on my heart, like this, because I'm regulating, making contact with myself. I'll slow my breathing down. I'll take a minute and take a few breaths as the client is talking, making sure that I'm in a space that I can receive what they are giving me. And that in part is taking care of myself. And that's the real distinction between self-care and self-compassion is really kind of that, because we can do the self-compassion practice no matter where we are. We don't need to go get the massage or make the cup of tea. It's like right
Mm.
now, right here. How am I caring for myself? Am I checking in? Am I putting
Mm.
my hand on my chest? Am I slowing my breath? Um, simple stuff.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite mindful self-compassion practices is the giving and receiving of compassion on the breath and bringing that into the therapy work, so that one can feel calm and confident to sort of be there for the other person.
Mm-hmm.
My version of your parents who were exposing you to Thich Nhat Hanh was my grandmother who was exposing me to Carl Rogers back in high
Oh,
school. And of course, he talked about love, actually, non-possessive love. I think he says in one of the videos in the Gloria tapes, he talks about that, I think, where he describes that kind of attitude of non-possessive love, of positive, unconditional positive regard and genuineness and so on. We've sort of, yeah, we have. I'm thinking about this same thing again. We've really moved away from that, or we've kind of, I don't know, we've felt uncomfortable with the word. You sort of said, dare I say it? I love my clients, but I mean, even Carl was talking about. I call him Carl, of course, but
yeah, your
you know,
buddies, yeah.
it, yeah, even he was describing that. So it's sort of it's in there.
Yeah, we're afraid of woo woo, right? We're afraid of love. Energy is the other one that I'm really into right now. I'm really into
Mm.
energy, and we're afraid of that. Like,
Yeah.
what does that mean, energy? And I'm like, well, have you ever felt energy in the presence of someone? And what we know from polyvagal theory is that we are exchanging energy in the lines around our eyes and the tone of our voice. I mean, energy is real.
Mm.
Love is present. Um, and maybe it's actually some of these bigger, most expansive emotions that we are a little bit afraid of because they're so big, you know.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
how would we what would we do with that?
Mm. Yeah. They're big and they're kind of in every moment at the same time, aren't they? You mentioned placing your hand on your heart, slowing the breath. Even that sort of thing gets reciprocated by the person that we're talking to, and they start to kind of slow down the body and slow down the mind. We sort of we mirror each other, and that's a kind of an energy, I guess, is where I was coming back to with that.
Mm-hmm.
What we've talked about, I guess, the way self-compassion helps to reduce or helps us to relate differently around self-criticism or anxiety or worry or rumination. What about the other end of the spectrum, in terms of growth and flourishing and sort of hope and optimism and happiness? What would be some comments there?
Mm. Well, I mean, if we think about growth and flourishing and happiness, it it requires us to hold some things lightly, like mistakes and things that kind of bad at the start, you know. My cousin, I don't know if you see the Daily Show in Australia. Do you know what the Daily Show is? It's like a pretty big comedy show where they use the daily news. Trevor Noah and
Yes,
big
I don't think
comedians
it's
are on
on.
it.
It's not on TV here, but I've definitely
Yeah, it's
seen
like it's
it.
a
Yeah,
big deal in the US,
yeah.
right? So she's a writer for the Daily Show, and I interviewed her for the Wise Effort podcast, and she was talking about like in this writer's room where, you know, they get all the news for the day and they have to make a sketch in a very short
Yes,
period of time. And she's like
yeah.
12, there's like 12 writers that are writing for you know, Jon Stewart, like these huge comedians, right? And and people are just throwing ideas out, throwing ideas out. And I said, what happens when you say something that's like not funny, right? She's like, not funny. We just let it drop and we
Mm,
keep on moving on, right? There has to be some letting go to be able to be in that place of innovation or expansiveness or you know, creativity, that and that requires some degree of self-compassion. Not the self-compassion like I'm going to put my hand on my heart and breathe because I said I didn't say something funny, you know.
mm,
They're not doing that. They're like, no, I'm actually not going to beat myself up about that, and I'm not going to play small.
yeah.
Self-compassion allows us to play big, and because we're here's the clincher. Self-compassion understands that it's not about the self in the small self way. It's a
Mm,
bigger self, right? So if my bad joke drops to the ground, I might be actually getting an idea in someone's head that creates a better joke off of my bad joke, right?
mm,
So just as you and I have been going back and forth, the things that you've said have have come from things that I said. And the things that I said came from things that you said,
mm,
right? And if we
mm,
were all caught up in what we were saying, oh no, why did I say that thing about this, that, and that? Or could have said it differently, we would miss out on the innovation that happens when you can be co-creating. So
mm,
self-compassion, I think, facilitates creativity, it facilitates openness, letting things be bad and
mm.
not getting so selfie about it.
Yes, yeah. Yes, being able to hold things lightly, isn't it? And to sort of let go of those perhaps mistakes or things that go wrong, but even kind of learn from it or expand from there. And definitely, I mean, that would be a pretty great kind of experience, I think, being around a table and being able to riff off each other. I mean, it's a good example of how self-compassion isn't just sort of very calming and quiet and hand on heart. It can actually have a lot of energy to it, you know, with self-compassion and can help us to really, yeah, extend ourselves and have experiences and be creative.
But you know, one of the places that Marcela Matos, a number of years back, I went to a Compassionate Mind, the very first Compassionate Mind Foundation retreat, and it was with Marcella and Dennis Turch and Kelly Wilson was there, and Paul Gilbert was there. We were all in Nyack, New York, and it was like the first like in-person retreat. And one of the, you know, we remember these exercises we do at these retreats for like eons. Like they're
Mm,
I could remember where I stood in the circle in the room and where Marcella was, right? And the exercise that she did. So Marcella, I think, has a background in improv.
oh,
I think so,
okay.
or something. That's a
Right.
bee. I'm a beekeeper, and there's a bee coming in here. It's okay. Um, so we were in this circle, and she had us imagine that we're standing. Imagine that we're waking up in the morning, and this is like a group of therapists, maybe like, I don't know, 100 or so. Imagine that we're waking up in the morning and we're doing something that we always do, like wash your face or brush your hair or brush your teeth. But when you're doing it as if this were for the last time. And you're doing it in the most compassionate way, and then act it out. So it's this circle of therapists all standing up, and we're like washing our face in the most loving, you know, brushing our hair. And I just remember looking around the room and seeing this group of most compassionate beings just tending to their daily life, you know? And that's, that's improv, right? In some ways, we had to practice self-compassion to even do that, like, because that's kind
Yes.
of, that's like the writer's room. But in other ways, when you see people freely being who they are, because they're freed up of their sense of self, it's just a beautiful thing. We're just all there brushing our hair and brushing our teeth. And, there's a creativity that comes from all of this,
Mm,
a freeness, a lightness. And I would think probably all those therapists that participate in that exercise, at least for me, I still remember it. I still think about it when I do my morning routine, but also it changes the frame of how you experience life when you experience from a more compassionate perspective,
mm.
especially with other people. It's even better.
And a sort of a playfulness, isn't it, that can be a part of it, really. It's
Hmm.
sometimes when we are self-compassionate and we're feeling sort of wise and strong and kind of caring towards ourselves, we can sort of then become playful with others, and that a whole many things then can arise from that sort of playfulness. I've just realized the time, and I don't want to sort of take too much more of your time. I know that you've got some fun things to do for the rest of the day, but I suppose, yeah, I guess if people were interested in kind of connecting with you or engaging with you or your work, where can they find you, and what sort of things have you got on that are available for people?
Well, the best place to find me is on my website at drdianahill.com. I have a podcast called The Wise Effort. And that's what I've got going on these days is I'm really interested in this concept of energy, um, how we tend to spin our wheels or we work really hard and feel like we're going to nowhere, um, and how to free our energy up so that not only do we feel more energized in our life, we feel more alive, more in contact with the vitality that's available right here and now, but that we're also those positive energizers for others. And we're using our energy in ways, compassionate ways, loving ways, impactful ways. And so I'm talking about that on the podcast. I'm writing about it in a book that will come out in a while. And then I have a newsletter called the Wise Effort Newsletter, which you can sign up for on my website as well. So those would be the best places. Go sign up for the newsletter and you'll hear little bits and pieces of what I'm up to. Um, a few little drops. I mean, I'm part of the ACT boot camp with Steve Hayes and Robin Walsler and Miranda Morris. We're doing an ACT boot camp in DC. If you're in the United States, I do an ACT retreat in Arizona in the fall. That's ACT and yoga, if you're interested in that. And then I bring a group of people to Costa Rica every spring. And that's not just for clinicians. That one is for you and your partner and your sister and your mom and your daughter. And if you want to come and experience ACT and swim and surf and do yoga with me, that one's just all good vibes. So come to Costa Rica with me in April 2025.
Mm. Gosh, where do we sign up? By the sounds
Yeah.
of
Get on
that
my newsletter and
particular.
you'll hear about it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll actually include all of the links to all of those things in the description, of course. And yeah, well, I for one am excitedly anticipating your next book, so I'll keep an eye out for that, and maybe even get to hear from you again, perhaps
I'd
when
like
that book comes out. That'd be great. But yes, Dr. Diana Hill, thank you very much for being on Compassion in a T-shirt.
Thank you. And when you put that love on a t-shirt, sign me
Yeah.
up. I'll get that as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Love is
Yeah.
back.
Love is back. Yeah.
Thank you.